The night air was heavy with mist, and the forest stretched endlessly in every direction. Tall trees stood like silent guards, their dark branches reaching high into the sky. The ground was wet with dew, and every step sent small splashes of mud across the boots of the running survivors. Their breathing was loud, sharp, and uneven. The forest should have been calm and quiet, but the sound of footsteps and rustling leaves filled the air. They were being hunted. The group of humans had once lived in peace. Their colony had been built near a wide river where the soil was rich and the sun gave steady warmth. Families had planted crops, children had played under the skies, and life had been simple. But that life had ended when the ground itself had broken apart and the hunters had risen. Machines older than memory had awoken, tall and silent, with glowing eyes that pierced the night. They did not speak, and they did not reason. They only chased. Now the survivors ran through the forest with fear pressing on their hearts. At the front of the group was Myra, a woman with sharp eyes who kept glancing behind to check the distance. Beside her ran Joran, strong and steady, carrying a younger boy on his back. The boy's face was pale, his small hands clutching at Joran's shoulders as if he feared falling would mean the end. Behind them came others, a small group bound together by the single desire to live. No one spoke. Words would only slow them down. The only sound was the harsh rhythm of lungs drawing air and boots striking the soil. Yet behind that sound was something worse, the faint, metallic echo of the hunters moving through the trees. They did not run like men. They did not stumble or gasp. They advanced with smooth, mechanical steps, never tiring, never slowing. The noise of their pursuit was soft but steady, a reminder that they were always there. Myra felt her chest burn, but she forced herself forward. She thought of the colony they had lost, the homes turned to ash, the people who had fallen behind. Every time the machines struck, there had been no mercy. She remembered the night the machines first appeared, their tall shapes emerging from the broken earth. The machines moved with purpose, their glowing eyes sweeping across the settlement. Fires spread quickly, and the cries of panic had filled the air. That was when Myra had decided to run, and others had followed her into the wild. Now she led them again, deeper into the unknown forest. Her mind raced with questions. How long could they keep running? What if the forest ended and they had nowhere left to go? Was there any place on this planet where the machines would not find them? The trees grew closer together, and the path became narrow. Joran stumbled once but did not fall. The boy on his back whispered faintly, asking if they were safe. Joran said nothing, only tightened his grip on the boy's legs and kept running. Safety was not something he could promise. Behind them, a sudden sound broke the steady rhythm. One of the machines stepped on a fallen branch, and the crack echoed through the forest. The group's hearts leapt with fear. Myra raised her hand in warning, and they all moved faster, their tired legs finding new strength. Fear was cruel, but it gave them speed. The night deepened, and the mist grew thicker. Shapes of trees blurred, and the path was hard to see. Yet Myra kept her eyes forward, trusting her memory and her instinct. She had studied the maps of this world back when the colony was safe. She remembered that a wide ravine lay to the east. If they could reach it, they might find a way to hide or to confuse the machine's pursuit. Time lost meaning in the chase. Minutes stretched like hours. Every breath felt like a battle. Some of the group stumbled and nearly fell, but others reached out to steady them. No one could be left behind. Each survivor knew that if they faltered, the hunters would close the gap. The machines never stopped. At last, through the trees, Myra caught sight of darkness that was deeper than the rest. She knew it was the edge of the ravine. She shouted for the others to follow and pushed forward with renewed strength. The ground dropped sharply, and the group slowed just enough to avoid tumbling into the depths. They stood on the edge, gasping for breath, their eyes wide as they looked into the shadows below. The ravine was steep, filled with fog that hid the bottom. It was dangerous, but so was standing still. Behind them, the hunters' faint glow appeared among the trees, their tall frames moving closer. The group had no choice. Myra looked at Joran, then at the others. She nodded once, a silent command. Without hesitation, she slid down the slope, gripping at roots and rocks to slow her fall. One by one, the others followed. The forest above echoed with the sound of the machines drawing near. The hunt was not over, but the survivors had bought themselves a few more breaths of life. And in this endless chase, every breath mattered. The survivors huddled in the shadows of the ravine, their bodies pressed close to the damp stone walls. Mist rolled thick across the bottom, covering their shapes from the glow of the hunters above. The sound of metallic footsteps echoed faintly through the forest above them, then faded into silence. The hunters had paused, their glowing eyes scanning the trees. They were searching, waiting, patient as the night itself. Myra sat with her back against the wall, breathing hard. The run had drained her strength, but her mind was sharper than ever. She could still hear the faint hum of the machines even when they were gone. Her heart pounded not only from fear but also from memory. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the colony in flames. The memory returned with painful clarity. The colony had once been a place of hope. Built near a wide river, it had grown quickly. Homes had been raised with strong walls, and fields of crops stretched across the fertile ground. Lights glowed warmly in the evenings, and the settlers believed they had found a safe future on this distant world. The children played near the water, chasing each other with laughter. Adults worked side by side, their tools striking the soil, building a new life far from Earth. For years, it seemed nothing could touch them. But the ground had hidden a secret. Deep beneath the soil, far below their homes and fields, the hunters had slept. They were not machines of the settlers, nor built by any human hand. They belonged to something older, a civilization long gone. For ages, they had remained silent, waiting. The settlers had not known. They had dug into the earth, built roads, planted seeds, and lived without fear. And then, without warning, the ground trembled, and the machines awoke. Myra remembered the first night clearly. She had been walking near the fields when the ground split apart. A great crack tore through the soil, and out of it rose a figure taller than any tree. Its body was smooth and dark, its head glowing with two bright eyes. It stood without sound, and then more shapes rose around it, one after another. People screamed. The machines turned their eyes toward the colony, and the hunt began. The settlers had tried to fight. They had tools, weapons, even small defense systems meant for wild animals. None of it mattered. The hunters walked through fire without harm, broke metal with their hands, and moved with perfect balance. Houses fell. Crops burned. People scattered in every direction. Joran had been there as well. He had carried the boy on his back since that night, for the boy's family had not survived. Joran rarely spoke about it, but Myra knew he had seen too much. His steady silence was not strength alone. It was sorrow carried without words. Now, in the cold mist of the ravine, the survivors looked to Myra. She was the one who had led them away from the fire, who had shouted for them to run when others froze in fear. Her sharp eyes and quick mind had kept them alive. Still, she felt the weight of every face she could not save. "We cannot go back," whispered one of the settlers, a thin man with trembling hands. "The colony is gone. Everything is gone." His words were heavy, but true. Myra nodded slowly. "We will not go back. We must move forward." "But where?" asked another voice, weak and tired. "The hunters are everywhere. They do not stop. How can we survive on this world if they chase us forever?" No one had an answer. The mist curled around them, and the silence grew deep. Above, the faint glow of the hunters still passed between the trees, moving in slow circles. They were searching. The machines would not give up until every human was gone. Myra's eyes lifted to the cliffs above. She thought of the maps again, of the rivers, mountains, and old mining stations marked long ago. There are places they may not search, she said at last. Places left behind by those who came before us. If we find them, we may find safety. The group listened. Fear still shone in their eyes, but Myra's calm voice gave them a thread of hope. Humans were not machines. They were weaker, slower, but they had something the hunters did not. They could adapt. They could imagine. And they could hope. The night dragged on, but slowly the sounds above faded. The hunters had moved deeper into the forest, still searching. When the glow of their eyes was gone, Myra stood and motioned for the others to rise. We move east, she said firmly. There is an old station in the cliffs. If it still stands, we may find tools. We may find answers. Joran adjusted the boy on his back and gave a short nod. The others gathered what little they had, nothing more than small packs and broken tools. They were tired, but they followed. The group climbed carefully out of the ravine, their hands gripping roots and rocks. The forest stretched before them again, silent and dark. The colony was lost, but their spirit was not. The hunters had taken their home, but they had not taken their will. As the survivors moved deeper into the unknown, the mist parted slowly around them. The night sky above was filled with stars, bright and endless. Myra looked at them for a moment and felt something stir within her. The colony was gone, but humanity was not. The hunt would continue, but so would they. The forest grew darker as the survivors moved east. The mist thinned, but the silence grew heavier. Every sound seemed louder than it was: the crack of a branch, the rustle of leaves, the breath of tired lungs. Myra led the way, her eyes sharp, scanning the path ahead. Behind her, Joran walked steadily with the boy on his back, while the others followed in a line. No one spoke unless they had to. Each step carried the same fear: the hunters might be close again. As dawn broke, pale light spread through the trees. The group stopped near a stream to drink. They cupped the cold water in their hands, letting it wash the dryness from their throats. The boy leaned against Joran, too tired to move much, but his eyes watched the others closely. Everyone's face was lined with exhaustion, but there was still a quiet determination in them. Myra crouched by the stream and studied a small device she carried. It was a fragment of old human equipment, recovered from the ruins of the colony. The screen was cracked, but it still worked enough to show data. Symbols glowed faintly across it, repeating warnings and signals. Myra had not told the others much about it yet, but she believed it held answers. Long ago, before the colony was built, explorers had mapped parts of this world. They had found strange readings under the surface, signals of energy and structures buried deep in the ground. Records showed warnings, but over time those warnings had been forgotten. Now, with the machines awake, Myra understood that the old explorers had seen the hunters before. She turned to the group. "We need to talk," she said quietly. The others gathered, sitting close to the stream. Their eyes were weary but curious. Myra lifted the device. "These machines are not random. They are not here by chance. They are guardians. Someone long ago placed them here." The thin man frowned. "Guardians of what? They destroyed our homes. They burned everything." "What are they guarding?" "Not guarding," Myra answered. "Protecting the planet from us. The machines are programmed to stop new life from growing here. They were built by an ancient people who lived before us. They left, but their machines stayed behind." A silence followed. The survivors shifted uncomfortably, as if the thought was too heavy to carry. Joran's eyes narrowed as he looked at the device. "So they see us as a threat," he said slowly. "Yes," Myra replied. "To them, we are not settlers. We are invaders." The boy's small voice broke the quiet. Then they will never stop. No one answered him, because they all knew it was true. The hunters did not tire, did not feel, and did not forgive. They followed orders written long before humans arrived. To them, the settlers were not people with homes and families. They were simply a danger to erase. The group rested for a while longer, but fear kept their hearts restless. When the sun climbed higher, Myra stood again. If we know what they are, then we can use that knowledge. Machines follow rules. If we learn those rules, maybe we can find a way to survive. Hope flickered faintly in the others. The thin man gave a shaky nod, while a woman named Lyra whispered, "Maybe we can outthink them." The journey east continued. The forest changed slowly as the ground rose higher, and the trees grew thinner. Large rocks stood among the roots, and the air felt colder. At night, they lit small hidden fires only when they were sure the machines were not near. Around the flames, they spoke in low voices about the past and what they had lost. One night, Joran finally spoke of the boy's family. His voice was steady, though heavy. "They ran with me when the machines came. The mother carried him, and the father tried to fight. The machines were too fast. Only the boy lived. I could not leave him." Myra listened silently. The others bowed their heads. Each of them carried memories like that. Each of them had lost someone, but each had also chosen to carry the weight of survival. On the fourth day, they reached the base of the cliffs. Sharp stone walls rose high into the sky, marked by cracks and caves. Myra checked the device again. The signal was stronger here, pointing to something hidden within the cliffs. She felt her heart beat faster. If the maps were right, an old mining station lay ahead. But before they could climb higher, a sound drifted through the trees. It was soft at first, like wind brushing stone, but then it grew clearer. The faint hum of machines. The group froze. Myra motioned for silence. Between the trees, faint glows appeared, moving steadily. The hunters had found their trail again. Panic threatened to rise, but Myra steadied her voice. "Climb," she ordered. "Into the cliffs. Quickly." The survivors obeyed. Their hands gripped rock, their feet searched for holds, and slowly they pulled themselves upward. The hunters moved closer, their glowing eyes bright against the dark forest. The boy clung tightly to Joran as he climbed, his small face pressed against Joran's shoulder. Below them, the machines spread out, their steps precise and unhurried. They were patient. They knew their purpose. From the height of the cliff, Myra looked down at them. She realized something then: these hunters were not simply machines. They were reminders. They carried the will of a lost civilization, one that had chosen to deny all who came after. And yet, Myra thought, humanity was still here. Still breathing, still climbing, still refusing to fall. The hunters might have their purpose, but so did humanity. The climb was slow and difficult. The sharp rocks cut into their hands, and the cold wind pressed against their faces. Still, the survivors did not stop. Below them, the faint glow of the hunters moved steadily between the trees. The machines did not rush, but they never turned back. Their patience was more frightening than speed. The humans knew the machines would follow until they were caught. At last, Myra reached a narrow ledge high on the cliffside. She pulled herself up and helped the others as they arrived one by one. Joran came last, lifting the boy onto the ledge before pulling himself up with his strong arms. The group sat for a moment, breathing hard, their bodies shaking from both effort and fear. Myra stood and looked ahead. The ledge stretched along the side of the cliff, curving around like a hidden path. Farther ahead, half hidden by stone and vines, she saw a dark opening. Her heart quickened. This had to be the old mining station marked on the maps. "Come," she said firmly, her voice low but steady. "We are close." The survivors followed, their steps careful on the narrow path. The sound of the forest below grew distant as they moved higher, and soon the opening stood before them. It was tall enough for several people to walk through at once, its edges worn smooth by time. Faint metal supports lined the stone, proof that this was no natural cave. Inside, the air was colder, carrying the scent of dust and rust. Their footsteps echoed softly against the metal floor as they entered the station. The darkness was heavy, but when Myra pressed a switch near the wall, faint lights flickered to life. The glow was weak and uneven, yet it filled the long corridor enough for them to see. They stepped inside slowly, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. Broken machines and scattered tools lay along the walls. Old crates sat in corners, their surfaces covered with layers of dust. The place had been abandoned for many years, but it was still standing. For the first time since the hunters appeared, the group felt a small measure of safety. The thick stone walls and metal doors might hold back the machines, at least for a while. Myra turned to the others. "We rest here," she said. "But we must also search. There may be tools, supplies, or records that tell us more about this world." The survivors spread out carefully. Joran set the boy on a crate, covering him with a thin blanket. The boy closed his eyes, too tired to stay awake. Others began opening the crates and testing the machines left behind. Most were broken, but some still held wires, batteries, or metal parts that could be useful. Myra found a control room at the far end of the corridor. The glass of its panels was cracked, but some screens still glowed faintly. She brushed dust away and studied the images. Old maps of the cliffs and tunnels appeared, showing how far the miners had once dug into the rock. But there was more. Symbols flashed in warning, just like the device she carried. They spoke of energy signals rising from beneath the ground. Her heart sank. The miners had known. They had detected the hunters long before the colony was built. The warnings had been recorded, then forgotten by time. She touched the screen gently, feeling anger rise inside her. So much loss could have been prevented if the records had been remembered. Still, she forced herself to think clearly. The hunters were awake now, and nothing could undo that. What mattered was how to use this knowledge. Later, when the group gathered in the control room, Myra explained what she had found. "The miners knew the machines were here," she said, pointing at the screen. "They warned others not to settle, but the warning was lost. That is why our colony fell. The hunters were always waiting." The thin man shook his head, his face pale. "So this world was never ours to begin with." "Maybe not," Myra answered. "But we are here now. And we must find a way to live." The group was silent. The fire of despair burned low in their eyes, but beneath it flickered a small light. They had shelter, even if only for a short time. They had walls around them, tools to work with, and perhaps knowledge to guide them. As the night deepened, they locked the heavy doors and set watches. The sound of the hunters outside was faint but constant. The machines moved along the forest floor, their steps slow and steady, searching for an entrance. The thick rock walls held strong, but everyone knew the machines would not give up. Still, for the first time, the survivors were not only running. They had a place to stand. Joran sat near the door, his back against the wall, the boy asleep beside him. He looked at Myra and spoke quietly. "If we can use what is here, maybe we can fight back." Myra's eyes met his. She did not speak at once, but deep inside she agreed. The hunters might be stronger, faster, and older, but humanity had something else. They could learn. They could adapt. As the machines prowled outside in the dark, the survivors began to plan. The mining station was more than shelter. It was a chance. And perhaps, it was the beginning of their resistance. The mining station was cold and silent, but inside its walls the survivors found a small spark of hope. For days they explored its rooms, searching through crates and broken machines. Most of what they discovered was old and damaged, yet even in rusted tools and scattered parts, Myra saw possibilities. Humans could take what was broken and shape it into something new. The first step was light. Lyra, who had once worked with farming machines in the colony, managed to repair a few lamps using batteries from the crates. The weak glow filled the dark corridors and pushed back the heavy shadows. The small comfort of light lifted the group's spirits. Next came food. Supplies inside the station were long gone, but the cliffs outside held roots and berries that could be eaten. Joran climbed the rocky slopes each morning, carrying back what he could find. The boy followed him sometimes, eager to help, though his small hands could only carry a little. Even so, every effort mattered. But food and light were not enough. Myra knew the hunters would not rest. Their slow, steady steps outside the cliffs were a reminder that time was short. If the machines ever discovered an entrance, the walls would not hold forever. They needed more than hiding. They needed a way to strike back. Myra gathered the group in the control room one evening. The cracked screens glowed faintly behind her as she spoke. "We cannot wait for the machines to find us. If we only run, we will be hunted until the end. We must make them fear us. We must fight." A silence followed. The thin man shook his head quickly. "Fight them, they are too strong. We saw what happened to the colony. They crushed everything in their path. We cannot face them." "They are not gods," Myra replied firmly. "They are machines. Machines follow patterns. Machines can be broken. We may not match their strength, but we can use our minds. We can set traps. We can strike and disappear. We can remind them that we are not prey." Her words stirred something in the group. Lyra's eyes brightened, and Joran gave a slow nod. Even the boy, sitting quietly near the door, lifted his head. For so long they had only run. The idea of standing, of resisting, filled them with a new fire. The work began the next morning. The survivors searched the tunnels of the station, dragging out heavy pipes, broken drills, and sharp fragments of metal. They carried stones from the cliffs and stacked them near the entrance. Slowly, traps began to take shape. Lyra and Myra worked together to create a set of spears from the broken pipes, fastening sharpened metal to their ends. Joran built a heavy mechanism near the tunnel mouth, where a pull of rope could send rocks crashing down. The thin man, though often afraid, proved skilled at tying knots and weaving rope into strong nets. Even the boy found his place, carrying small tools and learning how to hold a spear. Every hour of work made the survivors feel stronger. For the first time since the fall of the colony, they were no longer only running. They were preparing to strike. On the third night, the chance came. The faint glow of the hunters appeared at the base of the cliffs, moving slowly among the trees. Myra watched from above, her heart steady. She gave the signal, and the survivors grew silent in the shadows of the entrance. One machine stepped closer, its glowing eyes sweeping across the rocks. It was taller than any man, its limbs moving with smooth precision. The survivors waited, every breath tight in their chests. When the machine stepped onto the path, Joran pulled the rope. The rocks above crashed down with thunder, striking the machine's shoulders and back. Dust and stone filled the air. For a moment, the survivors held their breath, waiting to see. Then the machine staggered. Its frame cracked, one of its arms bending awkwardly. It did not fall completely, but it was wounded. A cry of hope rose from the survivors. Lyra and Myra rushed forward with spears, striking at the weakened joints. The machine swung its remaining arm, striking the wall with force, but the humans moved quickly. Together they drove the spears into its chest, sparks flashing as the metal cracked. At last the machine collapsed, its glowing eyes flickering until they dimmed to nothing. Silence filled the night, broken only by the heavy breathing of the survivors. They had done it. They had brought one of the hunters down. The boy stared at the broken machine with wide eyes. "It can be killed," he whispered. "Yes," Myra said, her voice steady and proud. "It can be killed." The group gathered around the fallen hunter, their fear replaced by fierce determination. The machines were still dangerous, still stronger in every way, but they were not invincible. Humanity had struck back, and victory was possible. Inside the station, hope burned brighter than it ever had. The survivors worked harder, shaping more traps, sharpening more weapons, and planning for the battles ahead. The hunters might return in greater numbers, but the humans were ready. They were no longer only running from death. They were learning to fight. The broken shell of the fallen machine lay at the entrance of the mining station like a dark shadow. Its glowing eyes had gone out, and its tall body no longer moved. For the survivors, it was more than a ruined machine. It was proof that the hunters could fall. That night, for the first time in many weeks, the survivors slept with less fear. But Myra knew the victory would not remain hidden for long. Machines did not think like humans, yet they worked with the precision of memory. When one failed to return, others would search. The forest would not stay quiet. Days passed, and the survivors used their time well. They built more traps, sharpened more spears, and studied the broken parts of the fallen hunter. Its body was made of metal stronger than any tool they carried, but inside they found gears, wires, and glowing cores that pulsed faintly even after death. The machines were mighty, but they were not endless. They could be broken, and every broken part taught the survivors something new. Joran studied the remains for hours, his strong hands pulling apart the twisted joints. "See here," he told Myra one evening, pointing to a cluster of wires. "This is where it failed when the rocks struck. They are strong outside, but inside they are weak. We must always strike at the joints, the chest, the neck." Myra nodded, her mind already planning. Every weakness was a chance to live. The others listened too, and the boy especially was eager to learn. He carried a small spear now and practiced with Joran when the days were calm. His movements were clumsy, but his eyes burned with determination. He had lost everything, yet he wanted to fight. The calm ended sooner than expected. On the fifth night, the ground trembled with heavy steps. Myra was on watch at the entrance, and her eyes widened as faint glows appeared among the trees. Not one, but 3 machines moved together, their tall frames shining through the mist. They had come to find the one that had fallen. Myra rushed to wake the others. "They are here," she whispered firmly. "Prepare yourselves." The survivors gathered quickly, their weapons in hand. Fear touched their faces, but there was also fire. This was the moment they had known would come. The first machine stepped onto the path, its glowing eyes sweeping the cliff. The second and third followed close behind. They moved slowly, cautious now, as if they sensed the trap that had taken their companion. Myra raised her hand, and Joran pulled the rope. Another set of rocks tumbled down, crashing against the lead machine. But this time, the hunters reacted. The first machine staggered, but the others stepped back, avoiding the fall of stone. They had learned. "Now," Myra shouted. The survivors leapt forward, spears in hand. The battle was fierce and desperate. Joran struck at the wounded machine, driving his spear into the joint of its leg. Sparks flew as the metal cracked, and the machine stumbled. Myra and Lyra attacked its chest, thrusting with all their strength. The thin man threw a weighted net, tangling the arms of the second machine. For a moment, it struggled, caught by the ropes, and the survivors swarmed it with sharpened metal. But the machines were strong. The second hunter tore free from the net, swinging its arm with crushing force. The survivors scattered, barely avoiding the strike. The third machine advanced, its glowing eyes burning bright, and the ground shook with each step. Fear filled the air, but the survivors did not break. They moved as one, shouting warnings, pulling each other back from danger, and striking together. Joran pushed the boy behind him and faced the third machine with steady eyes. "Stay back," he told him. Then he charged forward, driving his spear into the machine's arm. The spear snapped, but the strike slowed the machine for a breath. That was enough. Myra hurled a burning torch into its chest, the fire catching against its wires. Sparks burst forth, and the machine staggered as flames spread. The battle raged through the night. Metal clashed against stone, fire lit the dark, and the cries of humans rose with defiance. At last, one machine collapsed, its body falling heavy against the rocks. Another lost its arm and stumbled away into the forest, retreating into the shadows. The third lay broken near the cliff, its eyes fading to black. Silence followed. The survivors stood among the ruins, their bodies bruised, their hands bleeding, but their spirits alive. They had faced not one machine but three, and they had endured. The boy stepped forward, looking at the fallen hunters. His voice was small but strong. "We are not prey anymore." Myra placed a hand on his shoulder. "No," she said, her eyes fixed on the dark forest beyond. "We are hunters too." The group gathered together, their faces lit by the fading flames. The machines were still many, still dangerous, but the survivors had proven something powerful. Humanity could stand, humanity could fight. That night, as the stars shone above the cliffs, hope grew brighter than ever. The turning point had come. The machines were no longer the only hunters in the forest. The ruins of three fallen machines lay scattered near the cliffs. Their glowing eyes had gone dark, their tall bodies broken by fire, stone, and steel. The survivors stood around them in silence, breathing hard, their clothes torn and their hands bleeding. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, smiles appeared on tired faces. They had survived the impossible. For weeks they had been hunted, running without rest, fearing every sound in the forest. But now they had done more than escape. They had fought. And they had won. Myra looked at the group with pride. The thin man who had once trembled with fear now stood tall, a broken spear still clutched in his hand. Lyra's eyes shone with fire as she tightened the straps of her armor made from scraps of metal. Joran leaned heavily against the rocks, his chest rising with deep breaths, but his spirit was unbroken. Even the boy, small and weary, carried a spear with steady hands. The survivors had changed. They were no longer only fleeing from death. They were learning to face it. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight touched the cliffs. The sky was painted with colors of orange and gold. Myra raised her eyes to the horizon and felt a quiet strength within her. The night had been long, but morning had come. Still, she knew the fight was far from over. For every hunter they had defeated, there were many more hidden in the forests and beneath the ground. The machines would not stop. Their purpose was clear, to erase humanity from this world. But purpose alone was not enough. Humanity had its own purpose. To live. To endure. To rise again. The survivors spent the next days working harder than ever. Using the broken remains of the machines, they crafted stronger weapons. Joran discovered that parts of the machine's arms could be reshaped into blades sharper than any tool they had brought from the colony. Lyra found a way to use the glowing cores as power sources, lighting more of the station and heating its rooms. The thin man, who had once only feared, now worked with patience, setting new traps in the cliffs with ropes and weighted stone. Each survivor gave what they could, and together they became something greater. The station that had once been silent and empty now echoed with the sound of life tools striking, fire burning, voices planning. The survivors were no longer hiding. They were preparing for war. At night, Myra studied the maps again. The screens of the control room flickered with old data, showing tunnels and abandoned stations across the land. She traced the lines with her finger and whispered to herself. There were other survivors out there. She was sure of it. Not everyone from the colony could have fallen. Somewhere, scattered across the forests and rivers, others were still running. And if others were running, they needed hope. They needed to know the hunters could be stopped. One evening, as the group gathered near the fire, Myra spoke of her plan. We cannot stay hidden forever. There are more of us out there, still running. We must find them. We must show them what we have done. The hunters are strong, but they are not unbreakable. If we unite, we can stand as one. The group listened in silence. The firelight danced across their faces. Joran was the first to nod. You are right. If we stay alone, the machines will crush us one by one. Together, we will have a chance. Even the boy's eyes lit with determination. We can teach them how to fight, he said softly. Hope spread through the group like fire catching dry grass. They were no longer only survivors. They were leaders of something greater to come. The next morning, they left the cliffs behind. With packs on their backs and weapons in their hands, they moved through the forest with steady steps. The machines still roamed the land, their glowing eyes sweeping through the trees, but the survivors no longer fled in panic. They moved with caution, but also with strength. They knew the land now. They knew the machines could be broken. Days turned into weeks. The group crossed rivers, climbed ridges, and walked through endless woods. Along the way, they found signs of others, burned camps, footprints in the mud, scraps of cloth caught in branches. Each sign strengthened their belief that humanity was not gone. And then, one evening, as the sun set in a red sky, they saw smoke rising in the distance. Not the black smoke of fire and destruction, but the thin gray line of a campfire. Myra's heart leapt. She raised her hand, and the group moved quickly but carefully toward it. In a small clearing, they found them another band of survivors. Their faces were tired and hollow, but when they saw Myra's group with weapons in their hands and strength in their eyes, hope returned to them. We thought we were the last, one of them whispered. Myra shook her head firmly. No. Humanity is not finished. The hunters may chase us, but we are still here. And we will not fall. That night, around the fire, two groups became one. Stories were shared, plans were made, and hope grew stronger. Word would spread. More survivors would be found. And one day, all of humanity would rise together against the hunters. The machines had ruled this world for ages, guarding it with endless patience. But now they faced something new: humans who refused to bow, humans who turned fear into fire. The hunt was not over. But for the first time, it was no longer only the machines that hunted. Humanity had become the hunter too. And a new dawn had begun.